Hi, everybody. We're getting started in just a second. Hi.
Hey, Lisa.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Iliana. We have a couple of familiar faces joining us. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Hi. Okay, we'll get started in just a couple seconds. Can you hear me okay, Iliana?
Perfect. Can you hear
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our first Instagram Live. We're going to be talking a little bit about the current conditions in detention over here at Adelanto, and just talking about what it has been like for our clients and the representation. My name is Lisa Okamoto. I am the directing attorney with Immigrant Defenders Law Center. This will be, I'm about actually a couple weeks shy of completing 5 years at ImmDef. And I'm currently directing our locally funded initiative programs, which is our representation program for that represents residents funded by local government, including Los Angeles, Santa Ana, and the city of Long Beach. Iliana, go ahead and represent yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Iliana Gomez. I am a staff attorney in the NQRP department, which is the National Qualified Representatives Project. And I represent people who have been deemed mentally incompetent to represent themselves in immigration proceedings. And I am about to celebrate my 3rd anniversary at ImmDef in a week.
Yay!
Almost, yeah. So I've been litigating for almost 3 years.
Yeah. Just as a kind of housekeeping, we're trying to keep this limited to about 45 minutes, if not under. Please feel free to send us your questions on the comment, and we'll try to answer as many at the end. And we'll have some action call outs at the end as well. But any sort of information, please follow us on ImmDef_Law Center, as well as our website and our Facebook. You'll find information about any type of way that you could get involved, as well as any sort of immigration policy, detention updates. So just to start off with, I kind of wanted to give a quick overview about what immigration detention even means. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about immigration detention is that it is a civil detention, which means that the people who are detained inside are not being charged with a crime. They are being charged civilly for being undocumented. And what that means is, unlike those who are detained in criminal context or imprisoned in criminal context, those who are detained in immigration detention centers do not have any sort of right to an attorney. So they are by themselves, all alone, unless people can pay for an attorney, or organizations like us and other legal service providers can intervene and come in and represent them. The way that people get detained are in a variety of ways. First off, anybody who is apprehended at the border, including those who are seeking asylum, are immediately detained. And we'll have another Instagram Live talking about the current kind of crisis that's happening at the border with the migrant protection protocol, as well as the detention, the family detentions that are happening there. Just to kind of talk about it at the outset, one of the things that I think has been a reoccurring conversation in the last couple of months that to be frank, is a delayed conversation is about the plight of Black immigrants, especially Black immigrant asylum seekers that are currently happening at the border. Perhaps some of those discussion will be touched upon. The MPP, kind of the U.S. Mexico border live, Instagram Live. But I just wanted to give a couple of data and statistics just to highlight and center the Black voices, because unfortunately, those who are detained at immigration detention centers, especially here in Southern California, Adelanto Immigration Detention Center is the main immigration detention center over in San Bernardino Valley. And Black immigrant detainees are by far some of the most underserved detainees there, because there's just a general lack of funding to be able to provide representation for recent asylum seekers, as well as any adult detainees. But just to highlight some of the statistics, the Black Alliance for Just Immigrants, BAJI, has said about even though 7.2% of non-citizens are Black, 20.3% of those facing deportations are Black immigrants. And even though 4% of immigrants who are detained are Black immigrants, 24% of all detainees who are in solitary confinement are Black. So those are just some of the examples of things that we, as an organization as well, are trying to figure out ways to provide representation and uplift the voices. And I just wanted to give that as a context to today's conversation, because those are some individuals whose voices are not being heard right now as well. So first off, I just said asylum seekers are those who get detained. Additionally, there's internal enforcement. Those are our neighbors, our family members, our friends and families who might be at home, who might be walking on the streets, who get arrested by ICE and then placed into detention. Right now, ICE is allegedly only focusing on those who are subject to quote unquote mandatory people who are subject to mandatory detention. That only means that those are people who have been either accused or have been charged or convicted by a crime defined by the immigration law as mandatorily detained, but that can include something as minor as a simple controlled substance possession. And almost always, everybody who is picked up by ICE are those who have already completed their criminal sentence, so they're being doubly punished. There's also been ICE transfers. So if you are arrested by the police for whatever reason, and we all know about the over-policing that's happening across the nation, the sheriff's department then can transfer those individuals to ICE. In Los Angeles County, that should not be happening because there's a moratorium, but unfortunately that is not the case throughout the rest of the country. Lastly, there are unfortunately transfers happening between ICE detention facilities. And I want to also be a little bit more intentional. They're called detention facilities, but what they are functionally jails. They're prisons. Because the way that people are being treated, they're wearing shackles, they're in jumpsuits. This is essentially a prison. But there are internal transfers that are happening where individuals are forcefully being transferred from one detention center or one prison center from another in another state in this time of COVID pandemic. And so it's just what the most important thing right now is keeping an eye on what is currently happening, because ICE is incredibly opaque. And really at this moment, there's 21,888 detainees who are detained in these immigration prisons, and there are family members, our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones, our coworkers. So this conversation is just to highlight and uplift those voices. Now this kind of the conversation portion of it. Iliana, you've been representing clients who have been detained for the last truly your entire time here at ImmDef. Can you kind of explain the emotional impact that your clients have had, one pre-COVID, because it's already a traumatic event to be in prison, but then now with the COVID-19, can you describe kind of what the emotional state is of clients?
Yeah, thank you. So pre-COVID, there was already a sense of powerlessness, right, when someone is detained. Not only that, with mandatory detention, it means that you can't get a bond hearing for 6 months, right? So you're detained. A lot of times you don't understand why you already served a sentence. Again, like you were saying, being doubly punished. These clients are confused. Why am I here? A lot of my clients do have green cards, right? And so it's this idea of why am I here? A green card, I renewed it. What's going on? I served my criminal sentence. I was told that I only had to serve 3 months. I did every day of those 3 months, and now I'm in a different prison all over again, right? And so already pre-COVID, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration, a lot of fear around being in an immigration prison, right? Because like you were saying, there's not a lot of transparency with immigration and customs enforcement. So people don't know what to expect, and they get there and they realize, no, this is a prison. This is not civil, even though it's referred to as civil detention, that's not what this is. And detention really is a euphemism for what this is. This is prison. Well, there's already a lot of confusion. I have sat in court before and heard other detainees sitting there and telling the judge, I do not know why I'm here. I'm confused. Um, and so already considering the backdrop of the confusion, the fear, the frustration, someone is taken into ICE custody, right? Then you conflate, or not conflate, but you worsen issues, right? You throw people into this prison when there's an ongoing pandemic, makes it all the worse, right? Because think about our situation now. I can control my movement. I only go to the store once a week, whatever. I don't even cook, but I go to the store once a week, and that's that I wear gloves and a mask, and I only see family members. I only leave my house, in the evening when I feel like other people are already at home, or I can make my own decisions to control my movement, to control my exposure. Right? Not 100%, but I still have that power. And prison do not have that power. So you do not have the power to say no. I'm not gonna go. To this other cell. I'm not going to be
Mm-hmm.
somebody else less than 6 feet apart. Um, and when you're in prison, the hour that you wake up, the hour that you eat, the hour that you go to sleep, the hour that the lights are turned off, all those are out of your control, right? So there's no way to be able to socially distance yourself in the manner that the CDC and all of these medical professionals are telling us to do, right?
Yeah.
Even more fear. And I have read two different district court opinions. I actually read in New York too, but there are two district court opinions from the Central District of California. One is called Hernandez v. Wolf, and the other one is Freihat et al. Versus ICE et al. And both of these opinions, judges are acknowledging that detention centers are worse environments for contracting diseases, right? Because there's no real way to socially distance. And medical assistance is lessened, right? Because there's thousands of detainees, right, with a limited staff. And so even judges are acknowledging that right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, prison is basically the worst place that you can be, right? You can't socially distance. And so what's happened now post-COVID or during COVID is that my clients are even more fearful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even more confused. What's going to happen? When can I get a bond hearing? What's going to happen if bond is denied? I'm going to have to stay here, which, yes, has happened to many of my clients. Bond gets denied and they have to stay there. And there's this continual culture of fear that's going on there because, again, there's not a lot of communication from ICE, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, again, the pandemic has just exacerbated the fear and the confusion that already happens in what supposedly is just a detention center, but really is a prison.
Yeah, I think that's very true in terms of just the general confusion. It's already terrible that people who are placed. So the other thing that maybe perhaps those who are joining us are not aware of is that those who are placed in, legally they're called removal proceeding, but I think colloquially it's more known as deportation proceeding because that's what it is. It's that you're placed in there specifically to get deported unless you have a defense. I mentioned before that these are civil detention, civil proceedings, and that's very important to highlight because when people are placed in these detention centers, placed in these deportation proceedings, while they're treated like criminals or people who have committed crimes in a certain way, they don't have the right to an attorney either. Not only are they jailed, but they don't have a right to an attorney. And therefore, what you, Iliana, described about the general confusions that our clients face when initially detained, that's exacerbated by the fact that when they're initially detained, when they are initially facing a judge, they have no idea nor anybody explaining them exactly what placed them in these detention centers. And something as minor as a drug possession conviction can place somebody there. So that's a really good point to highlight in terms of just like the lack of information and the lack of kind of understanding their own due process rights these people are facing. The second kind of follow-up question, is you mentioned some of the federal litigation that's been happening and kind of going broader with that, but just also based on your experiencing and communicating with clients, how has this pandemic affected due process for our detained clients? What's it like trying to get in contact with them? How has your, appearing in court been like? And just your general ability to be an advocate for your clients?
So when it comes to my clients' experiences now with the removal process, it's, my advocacy has been extremely limited in the fact that I too cannot appear in person, right? Until I have my own safety gear. Not only because it's for my own safety, but because now it's a requirement to enter the detention center that you PPE, which is personal protective equipment. And as we know, there was a huge shortage of personal protective equipment. Even I've heard from someone who was a nurse that he himself did not have the proper
Yeah.
to be wearing. So if our medical professionals themselves are lacking these supplies, how much more the rest of the nation? And so it did take a while to get the personal protective equipment. So no, I could not go in person to represent my client, which means pushing trials back, which is huge, because not only is my client going to be detained for longer, they're going to be detained for longer somewhere where there have been positive COVID cases. I have confirmed with medical staff at Adelanto, for example, that there have been 14 positive cases of people entering Adelanto, which means no, enforcement is not halting in terms of not allowing people in just because they have COVID, right? And so, again, it's pushing my client's trial back, forcing them to be detained for longer. And what makes it so difficult to not see them in person and not appear in person is that I can't act as the source of support that I usually can be, right? And so there's something about having an attorney sitting next to you in court that makes you feel more comfortable. That's why I'm there, really. You know, obviously I'm going to do the behind the scenes. I'm going to file your paperwork. I'm going to write arguments, but also part of being a lawyer is sitting next to you in court. That's part of that comfort. And if I can't do that, I can't do my best as your attorney, and it feels differently. And so, yes, I've been representing my clients over the phone. I've had to push back trials so that I can be there and say, no, I need to be next to my client. And there have been times where I've had to do hearings over the phone for like bond applications. And I have had to ask the judge what my client looks like. You know, I have a client who's in a wheelchair, and I had to say, Your Honor, can you explain if my client is in a wheelchair because I cannot see? And that's an important part of the case because that client is extremely vulnerable to being seriously ill from COVID. And that was part of my argument, you know, part of the argument we bring in these bond hearings is that we're particularly vulnerable to contracting COVID, and even more so in a prison setting where judges have acknowledged again that there's a heightened risk in prisons due to the nature of a prison, right? Everybody is in, you know, one dorm unit. There's hundreds of people. You know, you have a cellmate that you can't necessarily distance yourself from. So again, I have been doing over the phone hearings. It's not the same as being near my client, which is forcing me to elongate these trials.
Yeah, and I think one thing I feel like we've also experienced and we've kind of been noticing also is just you know, I think in many ways, a lot of things have been like there were a lot of bad things that were already present just in society in general. We're seeing, you know, the economic downturn and everything like that. But I think this pandemic has really exposed a lot of the dysfunction, like the of detention centers, but also of immigration court. I think some of the immigration judges, for example, from the National Alliance of Immigration Judges, which is the judges union, they are voicing frustration of the fact that immigration court, you know, they have just started allowing for electronic filing. Before there was no possibility of that. And I think and you know, even the immigration judges have talked about, why are we not doing video appearances? Why are, you know, or why are we not able to see clients through a video teleconference when other state court, other federal court context is making that available? So it's not just that the pandemic, of course the pandemic is making things worse, but I think like some of the struggles that you're describing about is also because of the incredible lack of technology, whether it be delivered or not, that both immigration detention centers and the courts have been functioning off of, and it's just making everything worse. So, you know, you're talking a little bit about due process and representing clients. What are some things that you've heard about what's currently taking place at Adelanto itself in terms of, for example, you know, availability of personal protective equipment, you know, and you've mentioned, you know, I think somebody told you that there were 14 positive cases coming in, communication issues. Is there anything that you've heard or have heard from clients from the pandemic?
Yes. So when the pandemic first not first began, right? But when numbers started rising exponentially, a lot of people started working from home. We as an organization started working from home. This was maybe late March, early April. I did ask clients if they were receiving masks, any type of protective equipment. At that time, I was told no. However, as time went on, and I believe this was maybe mid to late May, I was informed that now there are masks and gloves. I don't know what kind of mask. I don't know if it's an N95. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what type of gloves, any of that, and nor am I a medical professional to be able to say, okay, it needs to be this type of mask. However, I have been still communicating with clients, and there is still the same type of structure, right, to where they're living. There's still a bunch of people in a hall, a bunch of people in a unit. I believe, you know, there has been somewhat of a reduction in the unit size,
Mm-hmm.
not in the way that people can actually still be socially distanced, right? That's still not possible in a prison setting, because that's what prison is, right? You're throwing a bunch of people in one setting as a form of punishment. Um, and so, again, previously there wasn't masks, now there is. Or now there are other forms of PPE, I guess the gloves as well. But still the nature of it is the same, that there's still a lot of people in units housed together. People still have cellmates. I just spoke to somebody today that they still had a cellmate. Um, so in that way, things are the same. Again, I did speak to medical staff and was told that there were 14 positive tests of people coming into the detention center, and that those people were quarantined. And quarantine is actually has been an interesting battle, because some people have been unable to communicate with clients when they are quarantined, and when a client is quarantined is also very confusing to understand, because I was communicating with a deportation officer, and he did tell me that even if a client isn't necessarily positive for COVID, but that if they have an outside visit from somebody, that they will thereafter be quarantined for 14 days.
Yeah.
And that could thereafter affect whether or not they're able to come into court. And so the consequence of that is, if I go to see my client less than 14 days before their trial, that means perhaps their trial could be pushed back. But
Yeah.
I'm going to see them to prep them for trial, right? And then it's going to be pushed back just because I went to go see them and they had a contact visit. And so, although there's measures being taken, it does make advocacy all the more difficult, right? Because, again, the nature of a prison, you're not in any way safe from the pandemic. You're more exposed. And so they're trying to take these procedures, which again just makes our advocacy even harder.
Yeah. And, I think one thing that we've found also, you were talking about the nature of quarantine being kind of complicated. And I think like the biggest thing, and I don't know if you agree, is just like the general lack of transparency that ICE is functioning under. And I say that because it is, to me at least, based on, what we see throughout the world, and the infection rate, it is incredibly hard for me to believe that the current positive case rate of COVID-19 is what's reported on ICE's website. I haven't checked recently, but it's in like the teens, I think, and that's just incredibly. I assume that it is because of there's just not testing. But Vera Institute of Justice actually issued a report in terms of what the actual likelihood of the COVID infection rate is, and it's multiple times beyond what they're reporting. And so I think that's one, the lack of transparency. And, you've been mentioning about, like the clients reporting and even before when we started talking about this, the general confusions that clients have. I wonder if you also feel that, I think Adelanto, specifically Adelanto, ran by Gio, the detention center here. It's always been hard to figure out what's been going on there, because they change policies all the time in terms of how our clients, how unrepresented people are treated, how, and attorney visits and everything go. But in a sense, before there was at least some sense of eyes and ears monitoring what's taking place there, because we were going there physically. There have been advocates going there. And I think now more than ever, that eyes and ears and kind of the accountability factor is at risk, because we don't see what's going on there because we cannot. And that it puts our clients at risk, of course, and then even more so unrepresented people at risk. And that includes, some of the Black immigrants that I had spoken before, who are some of the people who have the hardest time finding attorneys. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about, just the general kind of lack of accountability that might be happening over there right now.
Right. Well, like I was saying, the lack of transparency is a huge part of our advocacy. I spend a day trying to figure out what's going on. And not until a few months ago did an injunction get the case was Torres, whereby we even got, direct numbers to deportation officers. Before that, the method was to call continually and leave multiple voicemails with would get a call back. And it's important to be able to contact a deportation officer, because I need to know, one, like, where's my client housed? Even to send them mail now, I need to know where they're housed, like actual get their bunk number. Sometimes I'm unable to get that from my client, because some of my clients actually are illiterate. And so knowing that I need to be able to contact a deportation officer, you need to contact them regarding release plans. Like, hey, my client is going to be released to this person because they got out on bond, or things like that. And so only recently have we even gotten direct numbers to deportation officers, which people out there are like, well, why is that a big deal? Because I couldn't contact them before. I would leave multiple voicemails, not get a call back. It's extremely hard. And so, yes, part of the advocacy is trying to kind of pierce the veil, right, of what's going on. And another example of the lack of transparency is that there was an injunction under Freyhat v. ICE, right, allowing ICE the discretion to release people who had certain designated illnesses, chronic underlying illnesses, make them more vulnerable to COVID. And there were, numbers and numbers of applications sent in by our office, and many of them went, unresponded to. Especially I sent in like 8 applications for my clients to be released under Freyhat. And I myself had to seek out, okay, like, what is your decision as to this? Is my client being released? What are the reasons? And I did in fact get in contact with a couple DOs now, because we have their direct line, but I wasn't given reasons why under Freyhat to release them. And so for those wondering, okay, yeah, we're talking about, prison not being the best place to be, or awful place to be during COVID, but what can ICE do? ICE has discretion to release people.
Yeah.
Right? Even before this Freyhat injunction, ICE has humanitarian parole, that they have the discretion to release people. However, it's very rare that somebody is released on humanitarian parole. This is something that we were taking advantage of even pre-COVID, and our clients weren't being released. And then now under Freyhat, again, with these applications to be released under Freyhat, again, not being told why they're denied, but being summarily denied.
I think, that is probably another part that maybe a lot of people are not aware of, especially those who are not in this line of work, is that ultimately ICE does have and has always had the discretion to release people, and the discretion to whether or not to even detain somebody. I think one thing that a lot of us have been saying, and especially, in this era of, discussions of abolitionism, ICE stems from the same kind of over-policing structure that a lot of folks have been facing for, at this point, centuries. But I think the ICE, a person who is facing removal proceeding, there's also just a general debate on like the existence of the system to begin with. But, a person doesn't have to be detained to go through all of this. It is completely in ICE's discretion to detain somebody. I think that is one of the discretions that has been abused in this administration. The prior administration was not great either. Their like detentions skyrocketed during the Obama era. However, the complete discretion, but on that end, there have been ICE releases, I think, during the prior administration. The fact that that is practically non-existent right now, there might have been 1 or 2 parole releases at the very, very start, but since then we've, tried all avenues including federal litigation to try to get people released. But DHS has appealed, and it's just putting a lot of place in limbo. And I think one thing that we want people to understand is that it doesn't have to be like this. Nobody needs to be detained. Iliana, you mentioned a lot of your clients are green card holders, and they finished their criminal sentencing. That includes people, for example, who go before the parole board of the state of California, and the parole board deemed them not dangerous, not a flight risk. And it just does not make sense for them to stay detained again, especially during this time. I mean, civil detention shouldn't exist in the first place, but yeah, I agree with that. And so, in terms of how people can get released, I think just for kind of explaining for those who might not be involved directly in this work, you already touched upon just general discretion that ICE itself has. Can you talk a little bit about bond, how people can even qualify for bond releases, and some of the challenges you face, especially for the clients you represent? Those are folks who suffer from some form of mental illness. So can you talk a little bit about your challenges in representing people to try to get them released on bond?
Right. I have had an extremely hard time trying to get my clients released on bond, and COVID has only made it worse. And one of the ways that it makes it worse is that it has been extremely difficult for people to get enrolled in care prior to being tested in person for being COVID positive, right? So my clients often seek out mental health care upon being from immigration detention. And one of the ways that we seek to do that is, okay, why don't we get you inpatient treatment so that you can live at this residential center, get this treatment free of charge, and be able to really get the consistency of the treatment that you need, right? However, given the pandemic, inpatient treatment centers aren't willing to say, okay, yes, please just walk through our door as soon as you get on a bond. No, right? We want to test you for COVID. We can't just allow anybody to walk through our doors for their own, right? However, when I present my case to the judge for bond and I say, well, they're going to enroll, as soon as they can, there's an enrollment process. Once they leave the detention center, they'll go live with their family for a few days while they get enrolled. And this is not enough. This is not. The judge told me, please, if you're able to come back with an acceptance letter to treatment, then you could, seek to have, my bond decision reconsidered. But what judges are understanding is that that's not possible during a pandemic. I can't get into an inpatient treatment center. And I even went a step beyond. I contacted the medical staff at ICE saying, okay, why don't you write a referral so that my client can immediately be enrolled into an inpatient treatment center? And I was told that's not something the medical staff can do. And so really I'm backed up against a wall because I can't get inpatient treatment because, again, there's an ongoing pandemic. No one's going to agree to take people in without first testing them and taking precautions, right? They also have to lessen the amount of people that are accepted into these programs, right? So meaning more people aren't going to be able to get into these programs. Yet I present this to the judge, and the judge is like, well, this is what I want, and I'm going to. So that has made it even harder.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think one of the things that we kind of cautiously optimistically hope, but unfortunately are facing the reality is that the judges continue to not use their discretion we talked about how S has its discretion to release clients, but the judges then, when they have jurisdiction or when they have the power to decide these bond proceedings, they have the option to determine whether somebody is a danger or a flight risk, like with accounting for all the evidence the examples that you gave, but they have not used their discretion to release people either. So it's been really an uphill battle. I think for our clients and especially those who are unrepresented. Kind of just to wrap up, we've talked about a lot of these problems. I think one of the things that is important is that for everybody who's listening, there are ways for everybody to get involved in this and get in terms of advocacy. First off, in our Instagram page profile, we have a link that links to all sorts of different resources, including a media kit, Immigrant Defenders Law Center, as well as with other grassroots organizers and legal service providers, for example, Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice, Long Beach Immigrants' Rights Coalition, Resilience Orange County, and countless others. They have been campaigning. We have been campaigning together to demand that everybody detained at Adelanto be freed. And there's a hashtag Free Them All campaign that's been ongoing. So there's a media kit in our profile that addresses that. Contact your elected officials. The governor Newsom also has the power to shut the facility down. There's also, health boards in the San Bernardino County that might have jurisdiction to determine whether or not it's safe for anybody to remain there. I don't know, Iliana, I wonder, the other thing I think is, when this racial justice kind of uprising happened earlier, there was an onslaught of people providing for bail funds. And I wonder, I think that's the same for your clients and our clients for bond funds. That's probably another immediate way for people to get involved, to donate to these bond funds so that when people do get bonds, they can get released, because oftentimes, I don't know, do you have anything to say about like the price of freedom for a lot of these people, how high or low it can be?
I mean, just to put it in perspective, $1,500 is the lowest, right? If you're getting a bond, the lowest you will receive is $1,500. I don't know about everybody else. I do not have $1,500. And if you, I do not. And it has become so difficult to get a low bond that even bonds of like 8,000, 9,000 are being celebrated as good bonds, right?
Yeah.
Because it's either a bond. I heard somebody get a $15,000 bond the other day, and it was still a victory, right? Because now we've become so jaded, and we're used to getting really high bonds. And so I'm telling you, it's thousands and thousands of dollars that I believe most people don't have simply at a whim, right? At their disposal. And so I think bond funding is a huge way to show your support. And again, if you're not able to, I think just even spreading the word about what's going on, you don't have to reach into your pocket to be an advocate. You can just say, hey, there's so much danger in being detained right now. It's awful. We shouldn't have this. So even just using your voice is amazing advocacy. I know, I believe Anna, she's
I'm seeing a question. Yeah,
Anna, thank you so much. You've been really supportive. So again, like there are different ways reaching out, like you were saying, your local elected official. And I did want to like circle back on something, Lisa, that you were saying, the plight of Black immigrants during this time. I also just wanted to point out how awful it would be during this time to not be able to march out with your brothers and sisters who, you want to be in solidarity with, right? You want to go to these Black Lives Matter protests. You want to be out there, supporting the cause, and you're unable to, right? So it's, now I can't imagine what it's like to want to join a movement that your life hinges on, right?
Yeah.
Country, your safety hinges on the Black Lives Matter movement, and you're unable to join because you're again behind bars due to the system, which all the more just solidifies the fact that we need the Black Lives Matter movement. So I did want to just point that out too, how it further worsens detention because you're.
Yeah, I mean, this like system of imprisonment is really just an epidemic that's been existing for quite some time, and so I think it goes hand in hand and are related. So hopefully, like, we can uplift each other and uplift those who are detained. If anything, I think the number one thing is for any way possible for each individual one of you to actually hear directly from the detainees themselves, because of course we are the ones who can speak because we have the privilege to be here, but the ones who are truly affected are those that are still inside. And so as much as possible to hear directly from those people, I think, is really important. We're, I think, just about the end. Let's see. I'm looking at the comments. I saw one question,
right?
And it's from Anna. Let's see. want to become an immigration attorney and work at a nonprofit to help those who are still detained. Anna, thank you. And also I see that you have personal experience with the system, and I'm really sorry that you had to experience that. If anything, your personal experience probably makes you an even strong, like it is the strongest of advocates. And I think one of the things that I hope that we can address even during this pandemic is for those who are directly impacted to be also directly involved in this work. And the, kind of, I think the discussion always is how to do that in the least re-traumatizing way possible, because I think this whole experience is traumatizing to begin with. I think, the fact that you're involved, the fact that you're asking these questions about trying to get involved is already, you're already doing what is the first steps, if not 10 steps beyond what's needed to be an advocate, specifically to be an immigration attorney. I mean, I don't know about you, Iliana, but I would say, if this is truly what you want to do in this nonprofit setting, go to a school as cheaply as possible. And don't care. I mean, of course, you have to finish law school, unfortunately, to be an attorney. But I will say from personal experience that any sort of kind of prestige or grades or any of that doesn't, to me, as in somebody sometimes on the hiring end, I don't care about what school you went to. It's, whether you've worked before, your real life experience, and just your dedication and wanting to get involved. And so I would say go to school as cheaply as possible, if free possible. I don't know, Iliana, if you have any other advice on somebody who wants to become an attorney in doing this type of work.
Yeah, no, I'm really inspired, Anna. I'm really excited. You remind me of why I do it to begin with, because I too have a background with family members being deported, which is really awful. I honestly think, I'm excited. I'm going to wait for you to join the community. Yes, same. Sucks that you have to go through law school, but just do it. I did not get the best grades, and yet, this is my dream job, and you don't need to get the best grades. You don't need all that. Just all you need is your passion, and I think you have more than enough, and so I'm excited. Please DM me if you want to talk more about it, because that's really exciting, and I'm very excited for you, and I think you're going to be a wonderful attorney.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're already here kind of makes you one step ahead of everybody else. Is there let me just scroll through the comments to see if there's anything else that I'm missing here. So there's suggestions of, for example, bail funds and bond funds, especially to uplift our Black immigrant community. The blackimmigrants.bailfund.com. Also, Migrant Freedom is another organization that provides assistance. Let's see. Just also, something that I read that I've also seen in person watching unrepresented people go with bonds, but unfortunately, asylum seekers or unrepresented people who are Black facing judges face an incredibly high bond compared to everybody else. I think the statistic is the average bond is about $10,500, but for example, for a Haitian immigrant seeking bond, it's an average of $16,170. So these Black immigrant bond funds are incredibly important.
Yes, that's a huge difference. That's ridiculous. And like we were pointing out, people can be transferred from the criminal system, and I think the oppression that exists in the criminal system, of course, comes right with it.
Yeah.
As we know, Black Americans are often more likely to receive higher sentences for the same crimes. And so this type of oppression is existing, obviously, in the immigration sphere as well.
Yeah. Also, let's see how to get involved. We are hiring, and so please visit our website as well as our various social media to see our positions that we're hiring. Anna also mentioned, I see this throughout the other immigrant advocacy organization, there's a campaign to release Jose Tapete, who's suffering from mental illness, who's I believe been detained for the last 2 years. And so there's a campaign to free him, as well as a petition to sign or to advocate for his release. Let's see if I'm waiting. Our colleague Eva talks about how ICE hates something called a release on their own recognizance. Release on their own recognizance is where ICE can just say, okay, you know what, you're not a danger. you don't have to be detained. And that also includes our clients who are minors but turn 18 in child shelters. They often get immediately sent to adult detention centers because ICE will not use their discretion to release them. So that's a good point, Eva. Thank you. Let's see. I don't think there's a lot of comments. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation.
There were a lot of wonderful comments. Thanks, guys.
Katrina Blackley from Esperanza says Queen Iliana. Let's see. I don't think I'm missing others. Let me see. Is there any other questions that I'm missing?
I think we're okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. Oh yeah, is there anything on the messaging from our team?
I did not see it. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Iliana. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Please look out for our next one of these. We hope to do more of these so that we can make this a collective effort, because it really requires a village to band together for the liberation of all. So thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.